Yes, welcome back, my friends. That's right, in today's video we are making a Warhammer Strongpoint for use in games of Horus Heresy. Oh yes, inspired by one of those classic modelling workshop articles from back in the day. So anyone who's been keeping track of these terrain building videos I've been doing over the last few weeks will know that a big part of this has been inspired by using materials that are just freely available, that are cheap. And you know what? It doesn't get much cheaper than cardboard boxes, does it? Like that's the pinnacle of like cheap, effective terrain making. Like no 3D printing, no XPS foam or anything like that. No, we're going old school with cardboard and cereal box card, right? For this video, the idea was kind of sparked by a video that my friend Aidan sent over to me of this guy doing a YouTube short where he's just like, let's make the Warhammer 40k Strongpoint out of cereal box card. Wow, this is so quick and simple. And it's like, yeah, that's good. But these things were designed for little first generation Space Marines, weren't they, on 28mm bases? These weren't designed for the big boy Space Marines. So the challenge here was going, right, how do we tweak this and upscale it enough that you can't just fit, like, say, a squad of 10 on one of these things, but like an actual full Legion troop size of 20 Legionnaires, Space Marine Legionaries on there, right? Now, one of the thoughts at the start of this project was, well, why don't you just print off the templates and stick it onto cardboard and just follow the instructions and make your life simpler? So rather than print this out, a quick and, again, cheap and easy solution, you can do this so long as you've got a screen to look at these things on. You can literally take a model, take the PDF that you can find online for free, and just zoom in and out on the thing until you get the size that you want, right? You don't have to worry about printing it onto A4, because what we're going to do is literally trace it at the size that we want onto A4, right? Isn't that such a simple and neat thing to do? So the beginning of this video, it's a little different from a lot of my previous ones because I'm actually going to show you my process for making templates, especially for something like this, right? Because templates are really important when you're trying to make something uniform and repetitive, and like the little side and corner buttresses that this kit, I mean it's not a kit, but this tutorial guide from an old modelling workshop book back in the day kind of really lends itself to just cutting these things out on cardboard, using them once, and then that's it, you're done. We're not going to do that. With templates, we're going to be able to make as many of these as we like. So what's the process? Well, you've seen me mark out the corners on the screen, and once I've got those corners marked out, I can just go around with a ruler and a pen and start drawing those in, filling those in. Now, the nice thing about doing these templates by hand is you can always compare them back to the screen to actually make sure they line up and they're the same size. And the whole thing with just drawing these out on paper is, well, paper is pretty cheap and infinite, so you can make as many of these as you like. But paper by itself makes a weak template, so we need to reinforce that. And that's where good old cereal box card, pizza boxes, Coke can boxes, you name it, come into practice. So cut the paper templates out and get ready to glue them down. Now always leave a little bit of a lip around the paper template. This is so when you're then going around it later on with a craft knife and a ruler, you've got a little bit of give in case you've, with the scissors, cut too close and, run the risk of the template shrinking from cutting, too close to the line. So yeah, gluing these things down, a lot of people have a lot of different ways of doing this. I will always be a proud proponent of just using double-sided tape and just regular sticky glue, like the kind of Pritt stick that you can get in any Ryman's or Staples or hobby shop. Double-sided tape just gives it that extra little lifespan because it's quite grippy, and the tacky glue, of course, will just hold all the little corners in place as you're cutting around. And this is the thing, you don't have to stress too much about this. The templates are important, don't get me wrong, but you can always make more templates, right? I would always advise doing your best, because the reality is these templates, if you do them right, they will just last you project after project. They aren't going to go anywhere. And unlike the GW article where it's like, oh yeah, just print these once or twice and just straight onto cereal box card, well, we're doing that, but we're good. You know, the plan is we're going to use these to then cut into a thicker material at the end of the day. But as you can see, that's glued in place nicely. So getting a safety ruler out and my Stanley craft knife, we're just cutting along those lines. Always try and cut away from any of the center points where two angles meet. If you're cutting in towards that, you run the risk of cutting into the template itself. Sometimes it's hard to avoid, and don't get me wrong, I've screwed up many a time, but don't stress it. So the actual body of this build, what are we using? Double corrugated cardboard. So not just the one layer, two. So the kind of heavy industrial packaging that you get when you're at work or if you get something sent by Amazon. Although I tell you what, some of the boxes they send out lately are really weak. So drawing a template onto this card is nice and easy. Just, you know, give a little bit of room between the template and the edge, and then go around it with, in this case, a nice thick Sharpie. The main reason for that, and the reason I use such a thick pen, is we're trying to get an outline because we're going to cut on the inside. We're not going to cut where that black line is, we're going to cut inside that. It gives us a visual to line up the ruler, but you have to keep the black pen line on the outside edge. We're cutting out the inside. The inside shape is going to be universal. The outside pen line isn't. Just literally go around. With corrugated, it takes a bit more chopping with the knife, as it were, but before you know it, you will have all of these templates cut out. Now you'll notice when I was drawing these templates out, I had dashed lines for the folding points, as it were. I've not done any of the folding on the templates themselves. They exist just to be guides and to be flat. But with those areas marked out, now we can actually start scoring the cardboard to get those folds. Now we're not trying to cut straight through, you know, you guys don't need me to tell you this. The reality is we're just trying to cut through enough that you can bend it, but the cardboard on the inside is still happily attached, right? And the thing is, once you've got multiple of these done, you can start pushing them together and going, right, so this bit would go here and the tab would line up like that. But as you can tell, certain things like the actual card tabs being double corrugated and these templates being designed for cereal box cards, you know, they're not going to glue along nicely. We're going to have to do something about that. Also, it's worth noting, if you are doing the double fortress with a walkway between it, you've got to invert the template on the second entrance and exit side, right? If that makes sense. So you've got the little square box opening, that's where the bridge attaches, and then you've got the actual sort of trapezoid, more angular opening. That's sort of implying where the soldiers would climb up a ladder to get in and out of the strong point. So what do I mean when I say cut away some of the corrugation? Well, this is pretty much it. You just rip along that edge of where the tab is, and you're trying to leave just a skin of cardboard along the inside of the form that you've just cut out, right? That little tab is going to be doing some of the heavy lifting when it comes to gluing. And, you know, you can be careful with this. You can try and rush it a little bit. Don't stress too much because this will be mostly hidden once this is assembled. You're not going to see it, but it's important that it does its job and does it well. Now, sure, you could just cut these templates out and ignore the tabs entirely, but they will give a little extra strength, especially as we're trying to glue together these shapes that aren't perfectly square. These aren't cubes that we're making. They're little funny trapezoid shapes, right? And as you can see, that tab is doing that heavy lifting there as I put the hot glue on to just keep that form. It forms like a little hinge, a hinge that helps hold it all together, right? And don't get me wrong, these suckers can be awkward and they will want to warp and bend and wobble as you're trying to glue them together. But with a little patience and a little, you know, time, this is a time-intensive project. This isn't necessarily a weekend project, more like something you do over the course of a week. Before you know it, these bits will slot into place. And it's the exact same with the floor, right? You cut that template shape out, and then you trim all the tabs down, and then you push that sucker in. Now, getting this thing level, I just, you know, eyeball it, you know, the hot glue has some wiggle room before it dries set. It doesn't dry instantly. I know in the original guide they say to use wood glue, but we're trying to put this stuff together and make it last. We're not trying to put this stuff together and hold it together with tape. But you can put a little guy on there and you can see how it looks. And yeah, upscaling these things a little bit just by doing that, all of a sudden it's much more suitable for the game at the scale that we're playing. Only thing is, these templates were designed to be smaller. So if you don't cut out any inserts, your little guys are going to be just peeking over the over the roof of the fortification at the enemy. They're not going to be able to shoot over that. It's too high. And yes, this is something that you could modify before you start cutting and sticking. But hey, we live and learn. And it's a simple matter of just cutting out a little bit of cardboard that's in a rough sort of, trapezoid shape to match the rest of the design, and just use a Sharpie and go around, and before you know it, you've cut out an insert, a little firing platform for your guys to stick their bolters and weapons over and unload into the enemy. Now, the bridge walkway. This is a real sucker, and GW, God bless you guys back in the day, I do not like the design that you came up for this, alright? I'm just going to say it. It is hard to get this thing to work, right, okay? And sure, it's a different scale, and maybe I should have taken a bit more time to read through the instructions and yada yada yada. But we live and learn. So hot gluing one side in, making sure one side is completely attached to the Strongpoint fortification. The whole thing about the bridge walkway is it's two parts: the walls and an integrated base, which is wild because none of the rest of this project has a base, and then the little walkway that goes on top. Again, using those tabs for stability. Now, the walkway, I don't know what kind of magic you're meant to use to get this all in at the same time, but hey, my easy solution, we're going to glue this in like a drawbridge. So one tab, one side down, no glue on the sides, no glue on the other tab, literally just fix it in one place, give that hot glue a second to dry, because then we can lift this sucker and we can actually put glue on the side tabs and on the final end before gluing it all in place. Here's my question for you. Back in the day, right, if you've got that solid bottom to that walkway wall section, how on earth are you meant to reach inside to make sure those tabs aren't pulling away from the walls? Because you can't push your finger through solid cardboard, right? I mean, you can with a bit of effort, but you're going to destroy the model. So I don't really know what the idea was there, GW, but, such is life. But you glue down the other end of the walkway, and then what I've done is, after tapping that in place, is I've sort of squeezed the sides, and that's helped sort of make some kind of bond with those side tabs. It's not perfect, but it just needs to hold its weight and shape. And because it's effectively a box tube that we're sticking between the two sections, it's pretty strong. Now, right now, this just looks like a cardboard bit of terrain, doesn't it? This is the kind of low budget stuff that anyone and their dog could put together. How do we make this actually look good and look like something you saw at the beginning of this video and in the thumbnail, right? Everyone's favourite spackly wall filler. That is what we are using. You can get this stuff anywhere. It is dirt cheap and it dries rock hard. Do not use the No More Nails stuff, or stuff like No More Nails, because it's a bit rubbery and it doesn't allow you to sand it or anything like that. You want the stuff that dries like cement, okay? And you smother that everywhere. Fill in the cracks on all the corners with the cardboard, everything. But not the floor. Leave the floor. Now, we're going to put some details on this, just like the guide showed us back in the day, and that's these little corner buttresses and some to go along the sides. And these are just cut straight from cereal box card. We're not using double corrugated here because these are details. These aren't structural elements, and we want these to look like metal fixtures and fittings that have been put in place to reinforce the concrete structure. So a little wood glue, that's going to be the main binding agent. But then to actually make sure these things aren't slipping and sliding, because they don't naturally want to cling on to the filler wall surface. They want to pull away. This is where we're going to use little tappy bits of super glue just to pin it in place. Yeah, you could put tape on there and you name it, but super glue allows you to actually hold down the sections that are pulling away and go, no, that bit is fixing in place here where I want it. After doing this like 8 times for this build and 4 more times on another, my technique is this: glue one side down entirely first, wait for the super glue to dry, and then fold it over and hold it on the other side as you super glue that in place. that means that sucker's going to be flush to the wall and it is not going to pull away anytime soon. And as you can see, the spackle filler dries rock hard, and ultimately the cardboard right now looks a bit, it's a bit crap, a bit rubbish. So we're going to need to put some top caps on this, just like they did in the article. You can do that by just cutting out some L shapes of cardboards that match the width of the corrugated walls, but are longer than the buttresses, because we're going to cut each one of these to be unique to that individual corner. Some of these corner buttresses are going to be a little bit longer on one side than on the other. That's not because they're cut unevenly. These things are all from the same template. They're all the same. It's just as they've been glued onto the corners, some of them will shift a little bit to the left, some of them will shift a little to the right. So that the topper pieces need to be cut to be unique to each one. But you always keep them that universal 90-degree angle, right? You always keep them that uniform corner shape, because from a distance that helps make it look specific and industrial and manufactured rather than a hodgepodge collection of materials. But then it's just a matter of adding details. I mean, one of the things I did just before we get to the studding stage is I filled the tops of the caps of the corners with a bit of filler and spackled that smooth. But then, looking at the original guide, you get these studs running alongside the corner pieces. Each corner piece takes 8 studs. 8 times 8 is, it's a lot. You're dealing with a lot of these little studs. Cheapest and easiest way, get some old sprue and cut those little sucker ejection ports off, because they are free, they are bountiful, and they are everywhere. And they're the perfect size for this. If we were doing the original guide at the original scale, these would look way too big. On this, perfect, absolutely perfect. Super glue those suckers on, you're done. On to the next step, right? Now, naturally, being a Iron Warrior stan myself, we're going to be making this as a fortification for the War Master, for Horus, and for the Dark Gods, right? And a project like this is the perfect chance to use up all the little fiddly detail bits that aren't necessarily specific to your faction, but tie into the overall allegiance, right? So if you're an Imperial player, maybe you don't want to put giant Imperial eagles on everything. If you're a Heresy, Horus War Master follower, maybe you don't want to put the Eye of Horus on all of your forces that aren't actually Sons of Horus, right? So terrain like this is a perfect opportunity to use those bits up, especially the eyes that come with the Horus Heresy vehicle upgrade kit. I'm going to do a Chaos Star on this, or a half star, and again, it's just serial box card cut to length, and then some little corner triangles that are cut and stuck on the ends. Like, it's not hard. You can visually just look at this and go, oh, I can see how he's done that. I'm not using sprue to stud along the sides of that, however. I'm using little bits of plastic rod that I had left over and just cut to length and super glued in place. The whole thing with adding those little actual plastic kit details is they can be small and just vanish into a build of this size. So anything you can do to sort of increase their impact. So in the case of that really small Eye of Horus, I'm putting it in the center of that giant half star. Wonderful, works a treat. Now, you guys don't need to see me painting this. I've painted plenty of projects at this point. You paint it black, you dry brush the stone concrete effects, and you paint the metal and wash the metal. Like, it's simple, right? You guys have your own techniques and recipes for doing that. You don't need me to show you. But before you know it, this sucker is done. And other than leaving the actual walkway sections black, I think GW struck gold with that idea back in the day, because unless you go to the effort of texturing like tread plate and so on the walkways, yeah, just leave them black. You don't need to fill it in with different colours or metallic paints or anything. Just black, and the eye will naturally just ignore it. But yeah, oh my goodness, this is a satisfying project, right? Like I said, it takes time. It takes time to cut out the templates, it takes time to put the structures together, it takes time for the spackle to dry, you name it. But once you have those templates, you can just churn these things out. And when you have the glue drying on one, or the spackle drying on one, you can have the paint being put onto another, or drying on another. And before you know it, you can have an assembly line of these little fortifications. They are a fantastic, fantastic project. I cannot emphasize the impact. Naturally, of course, as I said at the start, it fits a whole unit of 20 legionaries, but also with room for like rapier batteries, or you could easily fit a maxed out Terminator squad of 10 guys in this, or siege tyrants, or you name it, right? Honestly, a easy, beginner-friendly project, really getting back to the roots of Warhammer terrain making, and it's a wonderful breath of fresh air from all the L-shaped ruins. I hope this video has inspired you, my friends, to make your own dark fortifications to the gods. Thank you for watching, Praetors, and I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.